But I think the biggest obstacle to overcome are people's perceptions, people's mindsets. So when able-bodied people tend to meet someone with a disability, the first thing they think about is all the things you can't do. And that's the thing that you have to overcome. You have to prove to them just because you're in a wheelchair doesn't mean you can't do the things that anybody else can do. You just do it in a different way.
First question for you, Ade, is what challenges do you face as a journalist with a disability that an able-bodied journalist may not, have to experience? I know you use a manual wheelchair due to having been diagnosed with polio when you were younger, and I myself was also diagnosed with having contracted polio as well, and I also use a manual wheelchair, and so I'd be interested to hear your perspective.
So I guess when it comes to journalism, broadcast journalism, and also, I make documentaries, and I'm a travel journalist. So my form of work involves a lot of traveling around the world. First of all, it was actually getting into the profession, finding a way or a route in. That was a challenge, because generally you don't see people like me or people with disabilities as travel journalists. So to try and convince bosses, heads of TV stations that I'm the man or I'm the right person for them to send across the globe to report or to make a documentary or make a film for them. And then once you're traveling around the world, I guess, look, there are the obvious obstacles. Luckily, my wheelchair folds and the wheels come apart, so it's easy to get the chair on the plane. I've crawled up the side of volcanoes, slept in the middle of rainforests, done all sorts of things that I guess people with disabilities are kind of not expected to do. But I think the biggest obstacle to overcome are people's perceptions, people's mindsets. So when able-bodied people tend to meet someone with a disability, the first thing they think about is all the things you can't do. And that's the thing that you have to overcome. You have to prove to them just because you're in a wheelchair doesn't mean you can't do the things that anybody else can do. You just do it in a different way. And I suppose that for me has always been the biggest obstacle. It's not the barriers that the world puts in front of me. It's the perceptions and the mental barriers, or the discrimination that you will get from certain people who think, well, someone in a wheelchair or someone with a disability can't be a journalist.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree that attitudinal barriers are very real, and I'm glad you encountered those well-connected people, and now you're on the screen and seen by millions of people. I think that's so important, not only as someone of color, but also as someone with a physical disability, and a very visible one as well. With the next question, what reasonable accommodation or adaptations had to be made for you to work, as a TV presenter, journalist?
Mm, that's a good question. For a long time, for me, there was quite a big fear to ask for, not so much for help, but to ask for adaptations to be made or changes to be made, in order to make my life easier. And one of the reasons why I had that fear is because I kind of didn't want to feel like I was a burden. So one of the first jobs I had working in a studio was as a children's TV presenter. And the studio was great, but there were little steps to get into certain sections of the studio. Um, some of the doorways were not quite right to get into the changing rooms or dressing rooms and stuff like that. And to move to different areas needed to be right. And for me, what I worried about was if I made a big fuss and I said to them, oh, you need to make this accessible, you need to add ramps, or you need to do this and do that here and there. I thought, well, they would think, well, you know what? Hiring someone with a disability is too complicated. Let's not hire them. Or they might think it's too expensive, and we haven't got the budget. And so I initially didn't say something. What I didn't realize is that it's everybody's human right for them to have a workplace that is accessible, that is open and that is prepared, or that allows them to work in the best possible fashion.